on to the cultivation of ethics. How does one become more ethical? Two general approaches. One general, one specific. The general way is simply by taking up a spiritual practice. That is, if one takes up any authentic spiritual practice, it will include ethics, and it will include the cultivation of other virtues, and also virtues are interdependent. You strengthen mindfulness or concentration or ethics or wisdom or love, they all synergize. Okay? So spiritual practice is the time-honored way of refining ethics. But then it's possible to also focus in on ethics and do specific practices. And what I want to suggest is that these practices often consist of, in their heart, trying out various ways of ethical living and learning from them. One can think of it as kind of ethical ed. What are these practices? Well, one practices in three domains: with speech, with behavior, and with the mind. Skillful speech. It's very interesting, you know. In the Hindu Vedas, some of the oldest spiritual texts we have, speech is described as, it's named Vak, and is described as this awesome creative power. And the Gospel of John begins, "In the beginning was the Word." The implication being that our speech, our words are very powerful and have enormous creative force, and so they do. A harmful lie can cause extraordinary destruction. Words of kindness and love can bring healing and comfort. And what we say affects us and our minds. We tend to believe and become what we say. Now I want to suggest that there are three main varieties of unethical speech. There are lies, which is distortion of the truth. There are withholds, when we withhold the truth. And there are misuses, when we misuse the truth to harm. Okay? So what then is the most skillful speech? What would be the guidelines that would be really helpful for us in understanding what will help us say what is most beneficial? Well, I have found no more succinct or accurate summary than the words of the Buddha, who said, "Say only what is true and helpful." That is an exquisite summary. So here are some practices or exercises you can do if you'd like. First, practice truth-telling. Let me suggest a great exercise to begin is a day of truth-telling. And this goes against the advice of Mark Twain, who said, "Truth is so very precious, man is naturally economical in its use." But when you take up the exercise of a day of truth-telling, what you do is, for one day, you decide to, as fully as you possibly can, to say only what is true and helpful. Now, immediately you do that, something interesting will come up. All the things you're afraid to say, tell the truth about, will start to come to mind. Okay? And so let me tell you something helpful here about truth-telling. Most people believe that telling the truth means blurting out the most difficult, embarrassing, or obnoxious things that come to mind. No, not skillful. That's the say only what is true and helpful. Okay? Do you like my dress? Oh, God, it's awful. No. Doesn't work. And I speak from experience. I went through a phase where we had a little community, and we basically told the truth no matter what. The community didn't last that long. skillful truth-telling is an art, okay? And most of us presumably will spend a lifetime learning this art of speaking as truthfully and as skillfully and helpfully as we can. And I have come to really think that some of the most profound words about speech that have ever been uttered are the words of Jesus, "The truth will set you free." I think the guy wasn't kidding. At many levels, the truth will set you free. Okay? So this is a powerful exercise. Now, skillful speech, again the words of the Buddha. According to the Buddha, wise people offend no one, yet they speak the truth. Their words are clear, but never harsh. They do not take offense, and they do not give it. Beautiful summary. So, let me suggest, if you're willing to play, do a day of truth-telling. Okay? Now, exercises to extend this. Find someone, a person or a group, you make an agreement to practice truth-telling with. This ups the level and makes it a very powerful, ongoing practice. Then you have permission and encouragement to do this on an ongoing basis. Okay? All right. We now move to an advanced exercise. Warning. Do not do this unless you're in a really good relationship and committed relationship. This is a good, really excellent exercise for ethical people in a committed relationship. It is really powerful. It is this. Sit down for 2 minutes and face each other. Sorry, sit down together and face each other. And one person says to the other, "I will remain silent during the next 10 minutes, but during these 10 minutes, if any thought or experience arises into your awareness that would be difficult or embarrassing to communicate, please do." And then you sit, and for the next 10 minutes, the other person, any embarrassing or difficult or painful thought or feeling or memory that comes to mind, you simply communicate it. Okay? Variation on this, the other person can say occasionally, if it feels appropriate, "Thank you." Okay? Then you reverse roles. Okay? Now, there's a level beyond this. Then, if you want, you take this as an ongoing practice. That is, you have the agreement in your relationship that you will do this as an ongoing practice. That is, whenever anything difficult comes up, you communicate it. And I have been graced to be in a relationship with this with my wife, and I can tell you, and fortunately with a few other people, it is extraordinary experience to be with someone where you know there is nothing, no experience you have, no memory, no thought, no embarrassment, no difficulty that you can't communicate. Okay? And it takes relationship and intimacy to a whole other level. Here's a general principle of intimacy. The degree of intimacy is inversely related to the number of thoughts you can't communicate. Okay? Every thought or experience you are unwilling to communicate sets up a separation. Okay? Question is, when you do the couples exercise, you're only talking about yourself or about the other person or whatever. You say it is anything that arises into awareness. Could be about the other person, could be about anyone. If you're going to do this exercise, you better have a relationship where you're willing to talk about it. Because if you don't, you won't. I'm serious. This is an advanced exercise. Do not try this with strangers. All right. Yeah. Okay. So, that exercise. Another kind of speech exercise. Wonderful practice, often recommended in spiritual traditions, not often practiced. Give up gossip. Here's an interesting criterion. Well, let me first read you a nice quote from the Torah. The gossips, Torah, the Jewish Torah warns us to be wary of the gossips and double-tongued, for they destroy the peace of many. Many have fallen by the edge of the sword, but not as many as have fallen because of the tongue. Okay, here's a wonderful criterion for talking about other people. Say only what you have already said about the other person or what you would be willing to say. Cuts out a lot of things. But it's a great test when you're talking with someone about a third person, just to check, have I said this to this person directly, and would I be willing to say it to him directly? Okay. General principle here about skillful speech. The words of Lao Tzu: curb your tongue and senses, and you are beyond trouble. Let them loose, and you are beyond help. Okay. So, right speech, or skillful speech, skillful action. A couple of exercises to play with here. We talked about the idea that at the heart of ethics and ethical action is the intention to be both harmless and beneficent. Okay? So, one exercise is simply to take a period of time, such as a day, and do the exercise, make a commitment to do no harm during the day. And that you can take it any level you want. But it gets very interesting when you move down, because when you really begin to work with this, it moves down obviously to things like not insulting or hurting people deliberately. It gets far more subtle because it gets down to, for example, not swatting mosquitoes, but also gets down to needing to be very aware of each action and speech to see that in some previously unconscious way you aren't harming. So this is a practice which refines awareness and sensitivity to both oneself and to others, because you're looking at more and more subtle levels to see the impact of what you're doing. Okay? And that's the way it is with all these ethical practices, that they both require and call forth an increasing sensitivity both to your experience and the experiences of others. Okay? So they hone empathy.